like to call the Township Committee meeting to order. John, would you lead us in a salute, please?
Sure. Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Give her a chance to see. Okay. All right. Adequate notice of this meeting was provided pursuant to the New Jersey Open Public Meetings Law by posting a notice on the bulletin board in the municipal building and by emailing a copy of the notice along with the agenda of this meeting to the Press of Atlantic City, Atlantic County Record, Camden Courier, and Newark Star Ledger. Ms. Gatto?
Here.
Mr. Gishard?
Present.
Mr. Kurtz?
here.
Mrs. Link?
Here.
Mayor Sullivan?
Yes, here. Thank you. The only item on the agenda is a resolution to approve an emergency appropriation to repair a fire truck. Mr. Solicitor, before we get into it, would you please?
Yes. Despite the way I'm dressed, I am an attorney, and I do represent the township.
Please speak into the microphone.
I am. I'll be louder.
Now, okay.
It came to my attention that there was a fire truck out of commission. I spoke to the fire chief for Mays Landing, Bob Hamilton, and garnered the facts that this is one of the first pieces out of the building for every fire. It's a 2,400-gallon tanker pumper. And based upon my understanding that tanker pumper's tank was not repairable, so the truck is out of commission. So I had on July the 9th, by telephone, took testimony from Mr. Hamilton, and also Dorothy Gallagher was on the line to receive the testimony. That testimony, I'll briefly summarize it. This is the first piece out of the building. It's a critical piece, and in the opinion of the fire chief Hamilton, not having it available was an actual and immediate emergency. And those are terms of art as are used in the statute. Based upon that testimony, I recommended to Dorothy that she declare as the CFO that an emergency did in fact exist, which she did. Under our ordinance, she has the authority to do that, as does the administrator. So I took it one step further because under the administrative code, the mayor has some say in that as well as the statute, which is NJSA 40A:11-6. I relayed telephonically the same testimony from Mr. Hamilton to the mayor, and I asked the mayor if, in his opinion, it represented an immediate and actual emergency, and he affirmed that in his opinion it did as well. So we have declared an emergency to exist. We've authorized the company that's repairing or replacing the tank to proceed on an emergency basis. And at our next Township Committee meeting, we will ratify that. I've also directed Dorothy to send a necessary form to the state, which has to be done promptly, outlining what was done and why it was done. So what you have is the factual basis for the declaration of an emergency, and in order to effectuate that, you now have to authorize an emergency appropriation to repair that fire truck. And that is the sole and only thing that's on tonight's agenda. I would ask our municipal clerk to place on the next agenda ratification of the declaration by the mayor and the CFO that an emergency does in fact exist.
Thank you. Mike, did you have anything?
No, nothing to add, except this is for the appropriation.
Right, okay.
Right, and if I could just, Mayor, because one of the questions I had when I saw emergency appropriation, I understood that to be outside of the budget, and I was concerned about that because I knew we had money budgeted for fire apparatus, and I didn't want us to exceed it. I know I'm explaining it. So I didn't want to see us exceeding or adding on to that outside of what we already have budgeted because the money is there. So Mike gave me a great answer. I'll just read his email back to me. That we have the 200,000 in this year's budget toward fire trucks. We also have 200,000 in last year's budget, plus an 80,000 in this year's and last year's budget for rescue ambulances, totaling 560,000. None of this money can be spent until an appropriation ordinance is adopted, and the plan is to put that on the next agenda for a first reading. So we can't spend that money that we have budgeted until we do this appropriation ordinance. So as I understand it, we're going to do the emergency appropriation outside of the budget, but pay ourselves back via the appropriation ordinance. That process will start next meeting. Okay.
Okay, so,
Mr. Mayor, just so that you know, this appropriation vote by resolution will require 4 affirmative votes.
thank you. Let me read the resolution. It's emergency resolution NJS 40A:4-48. An emergency has arisen with respect to the major repairs to the fire engine, and no adequate provision was made in the 2015 budget for aforesaid purpose. NJS 40A:40-46 provides for the creation of an emergency appropriation for the purpose mentioned above, and the total amount of the emergency appropriation created, including the appropriation to be created by this resolution, is $30,000. And 3% of the total operating appropriations in the budget for 2015 is $625,156.45. And the foregoing appropriation, together with prior appropriations, does not exceed 3% of the total operating appropriations. That includes the utility appropriations in the budget for 2015. Therefore, in accordance with NJS 40A:4-48, 1, an emergency appropriation is hereby made for the fire department and other expenses in the amount of $30,000. 2, that said emergency appropriation shall be provided in full from a capital ordinance intended to be adopted by the township forthwith, which capital ordinance will appropriate the aggregate sum of $560,000, inclusive of the sum of $30,000, to fund the cost of the major repairs to the fire engine. The 2 certified copies of this resolution shall be filed with the Director of the Division of Local Government Service. This resolution shall take effect immediately upon adoption this 13th day of July 15th. What's your pleasure?
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Are there any questions at all to this resolution? Mrs.
Yeah,
Zink, go ahead.
I got a couple of questions. One, the nature of this, the engine, what is, I mean, not that it's
It's the tank itself,
the
Rodney.
tank itself.
The tank that currently exists has
Okay, that's
cracked
what
and
I
is
thought it
not,
was.
it's not repairable.
It's not repairable, so it's for replacement of the tank.
Yes.
And why is it that we have not passed this emergency appropriation yet? Yeah.
Just brought to our attention.
No, I don't mean the $30,000. I mean the money from which this will be taken.
Just haven't had a need to do it.
Okay.
Probably should have, to answer your question accurately. We probably should have done it at the beginning of
Talking
the
about the
year,
appropriation ordinance.
in case something
Yeah.
happened, but we didn't anticipate, you know.
Okay, so if something like this happens again, having passed the ordinance, then we shouldn't be a problem.
Right.
Right.
It
I'm going to
just-
assume it probably had something to do with changing in our finance office as well, doing that
Yes.
turnover, yeah.
With no disrespect to
Yeah,
either
no,
the
it's not a
prior or the
criticism.
present.
No,
Just a fact.
Right.
Should we not have an emergency fund that is already in place, say, it's just for one fire department? We should have it for every one of them in place,
Well-
in case.
we do. We budget money in our budget to do repairs on equipment. This one is a little bit extraordinary
Oh, okay.
in size. We really couldn't budget that kind of money, or you would be setting a tax rate much higher than you had to,
Okay.
not knowing what an expense is. We're very fortunate, the fact that we have this money set aside at all, or it would hit next year's budget.
Any
other questions?
Yeah, what is the significance of the 3%? What is that?
You go over that, there's more requirements. I don't know what they are, but it's more requirements, I'm sure.
Okay,
The statute, it's over under 3%. There are other procedures that the Division of Local Government Service requires.
and that 3% applies to things that are outside the budget, or what is that, what is it?
It's
for operating costs. Okay, so anything outside that, there's another process that has to be gone through in order to get approval.
If total aggregate it exceeds
The 3% of the,
all
yeah,
emergencies together for that year, or
Mhm.
3%.
okay, thank you.
So how much would we be allowed to, with 3% of the total budget?
600 some thousand.
600,000, which,
Yeah, it's the 625.
That figure that's in here.
Yeah.
625. That's the emergencies. If you go over that amount for your emergencies only,
Okay,
then there are other procedures that the state requires.
okay.
Okay. Mrs. Anderson?
Ms. Gatto?
Yes.
Mr. Gouchard?
yes.
Mr. Kurtz?
Yes.
Mrs. Link?
Yes.
Mayor Silver?
Yes.
All yes and carried.
Move to adjourn. Oh, move to public
Yeah,
comment.
at this time, I'd like to open up the meeting to public comment. Anyone in the public wish to come on, please, sir?
Chief first.
Bob Hamilton, Chief of the Fire Department. Mr. Sandman said it very well, what the situation was. We appreciate that you guys are taking it serious because it is serious. This is our first run of these, even though it's 20 years old. We feel if we put a new tank in it, that we could probably get something. The only other option I think we really had was to replace the truck. And we got a good older than that, that we'll have another meeting. We appreciate you guys recognizing this as a genuine emergency because we have contingency plans in place to cover the shortcomings for right now, but it's not an ideal situation. We need to get this truck back in service as quick as we can. And I just wanted to say thank you.
Thank you, Chief.
Could I ask you a question?
Chief, when you said several, you meant 5 to 10 years, right?
Well,
At least 5.
we're hoping at least 5.
It has to be at least 5.
25 seems to be the magic year from
Okay.
our past history with fire apparatus for when it really needs replaced.
Okay. Just by statute, it has to be at least 5 years to qualify for this
Yeah,
money.
and I got no guarantees, I have no guarantees on that.
No.
But we do maintain our trucks, we do our very best to keep them in service as long as we can.
Good, Rodney.
Is this an extraordinary type failure, or is this
Yes.
not very, it is?
And what happened 20 years ago when we bought this truck, we were just talking about the fiberglass tank was all the rage. And now we're finding that a lot of them are failing
I see.
in the bigger tanks, the 2,500 gallon.
And you can't find anybody to
Tank are out
touch
of
them.
business. Well, so what they'll actually do is take this tank out and put a poly tank in. And it'll outlast the truck.
All right, thank you.
The good thing
Is-
about it is this is the company that built it, right, originally?
The company that's doing the job is the one that did the body work on it.
Okay.
Chassis came from another place, but they have all the specs already, so I don't have to run it out there and have them pull it out and measure everything. They already have all the specs. They'll have the tank built. As soon as it's built, we'll run the truck out. They'll put it in. They guaranteed me within a week or so that they will put it in,
Great.
bring it back, and hopefully put it right back in service.
What will you use as a backup for this?
I'm sorry.
What will you use as a backup for this?
Well, we have contingencies, like I said, first thing we have to do is change our running order, obviously. We have to change our way of thinking when we're on the scene. And we're gonna have to use mutual aid a little more now, whether it comes from within the township or outside the township. We can cover the gap, but it's not an ideal situation, obviously.
Okay.
Chief, when he decided to step up to the plate, he filled his plate over full with issues that he's dealing with, and I just commend you, Chief, for handling it the way you do.
Thank you, I appreciate the.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The other infamous chief, did you want to say something?
Oh, yes. First of all, I don't need a mic. I was complimenting the committee tonight. Unfortunately,
For
this
record's
is
sake,
recorded,
Bill. Yeah.
so, yeah, this is, that's all right.
My name is Mr. Will from Clone Fire Company, and I'll tell you, I'd like to see one thing on the ordinance. Would you put down the word 19? That's 1819, that is the vehicle that's being, the tank's being repaired. That's important. And thank you, have a good evening.
Thank you, Bill.
Yeah.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else in the public wish to say anything?
Do we need to amend the resolution at all? or-
I think,
No.
Okay.
where would that be put?
You're aware of what this meeting's about, right, Richard?
On the second part.
This is a special meeting. It was for an appropriation for emergency repairs to a fire truck. It's not it's a public meeting in that regard, but the next meeting is next week.
Okay, I just wanted to make, okay, that's fine.
That's right.
I'm allowed to be in here, right?
But you're always allowed to be in here. I just wasn't sure if you knew why we were having the meeting tonight.
I'll just wait till.
Okay. Anyone else?
Move to close the public portion.
Second.
Motion is second. Any questions or comments?
All those in favor? All those in favor?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Move to adjourn.
Second.
The motion is second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Meeting adjourned.